You know, we had in 2008, what an incredible opportunity. Crisis is an opportunity. We had the global meltdown, economic meltdown. That was a chance to sit back and say, something's wrong here. We can't go from dot-com boom to bust, housing boom, bust. This is crazy. Let's change the bloody system. But what did we do? The first thing Mr. Bush did, and then Mr. Obama, pump hundreds of billions of dollars into the banks that created the problem, into the auto sector without any strings attached. All they said was, please, please, please get back up and running and growing. We act, and well, anyway, I won't go on for that. Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And that's what we're doing. We can modify we can change these human-created things. We can't change the world of nature. Do I have?
Yes, you do.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to get around to saying, what kind of shift do we need? We need a shift from the anthropocentric point of view now. I think this is at the heart of our problems. We have come to think we're so bloody important. We're going to create all of these ideas and concepts, governments and departments of environment and various, and we're going to manage the entire planet through the lenses of our perspectives. And we think we're in control and it's ours to take charge. The reality is we need a biocentric point of view in which we see ourselves as one species among a community of other organisms who keep the planet habitable and healthy for animals like us. We are a part of that community. We are not the dominant animal in charge of the whole thing. We have to get away from trying to shoehorn nature into our economic, political, and social priorities. We've got to live with nature as it is and do everything we can to ensure that nature, the goose, prospers and is fat and healthy. And then we will benefit. We will reap all of the benefits that come from that. But look at what's happened to the way we try to do things. December last year, Copenhagen, 192 countries trying to negotiate the atmosphere as if it belonged to each of them. How can you look at it, what is a single system, through 192 different national lenses, and each of the 192 countries has its own economic priorities and agendas, and then attempt to manage the atmosphere? It's insane. It can never work this way until we all agree. The atmosphere is our highest priority because it's what lets us live. And whatever we do, we've got to shoehorn our political agenda, our national agendas, our economic agendas, we've got to shoehorn them into a way that will allow the flourishing of that atmosphere. Nagoya, the same thing. 192 more countries came to Nagoya in Japan a couple weeks ago and tried to negotiate the future of biodiversity. Do you think biodiversity cares about our economic or our national borders? Of course not. And yet we're trying to determine the future of biodiversity on the planet through the same kind of international mechanisms that won't work. The planet has been fully occupied and fully developed by more than 30 million species for hundreds of thousands of years. The Brundtland Commission report, Our Common Future, was a groundbreaking report that coined the phrase sustainable development. The Brundtland Commission report advocated protecting 12% of our land base for the rest of nature. And that was just shocking to me. We, one species out of 30 million, think it's our God-given right to take over 88% of the planet's surface, terrestrial surface, and think that that's not going to have enormous consequences. 88% for human development? That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Now Nagoya says, oh, let's try to protect 17%. So that's still 83% of the land base for us, and the vast bulk of the oceans are open for us. We can't do it. We have to shift. I believe we have to shift away from having a green party. Thank goodness you're here, but it shouldn't be. The green shouldn't be a political football, for God's sake. It should be the basis on which our whole system of living is built. That whether you're right wing or left wing. So anyway, yeah, it is time to stop. Let me just say that we look to some bright spots as models for us. Bhutan, of course, everybody knows that they have a gross happiness index rather than a gross domestic product. We know that now Bolivia, that poor country of Bolivia, and in which they've elected the first indigenous person as prime minister or president in any country in the world, and they've now enshrined Mother Nature in their constitution so that forests and fish and birds have a constitutional right to exist and flourish. We have Cuba as a model. People say, well, where are we what do we have to go to? I look to Cuba as a model where 80% of the food consumed in their cities is grown right in the cities. That came out of necessity. But there are ways, I think, that we can begin to shift from the current economic paradigm. Let me just conclude by saying, I think that the problem with the economy right now is it's so fundamentally flawed that however well-meaning we are, if we don't toss this system out or radically modify it, we're still going to be led down a very, very suicidal path. First of all, the big mistake made at Bretton Woods in 1944 when they were designing the economy for after the Second World War and created the World Bank and the IMF and so on, is that they left nature out. Nature, as was mentioned earlier, performs dozens of services that keep the planet healthy and habitable for us, that make economies possible. And to me, the most frightening report I've heard in years was when 70% of honeybees in North America suddenly vanished. And that sent the biggest bolt of fear through me, because if pollinators were to disappear, we would follow very, very quickly. I mean, it wouldn't be possible for humanity to exist without pollinators. And that's considered by economists irrelevant. It's an externality. Nature's performance is basically dismissed or overlooked by our conventional economic system. Now, I know there's a big push by ecological economists to internalize what we currently externalize, and is an exercise that's very interesting and it's a good thing to do. But I happen to think there are lots of things that are sacred. And when you have something that's sacred, you cannot put a value on that. It's beyond economics. And that's the challenge, is how do you incorporate the sacred? And I've learned this through my Indigenous brothers and sisters who've taught me in Canada that the earth is literally our mother. How do you put an economic value on your mother? That we are created out of the sacred elements, earth, air, fire, and water. How do you put a value on things that are sacred? And the other problem is that we've created an economy, a system now in which growth has become the very definition of progress. Ask any politician, even a green politician, my bet, or a corporate executive, how well did you do last year? And the chances are, within a picosecond, they'll talk about growth in GDP, in the economy, in market share, jobs, profit. Growth has become the very definition of progress. But what is growth? What does growth do for us? Growth doesn't do a damn thing for us. It's just a description of a system. Growth, how can you make growth an end that we're all looking for? Growth is just a means to something else, it seems to me. But growth has become the definition of progress, and therefore nobody wants to impede progress, so we never question the reality of what the economy is all about. What is an economy for? How much is enough? Are there no limits? Are we happier with all this stuff? We should be asking these questions, but even the discussion here was about fitting this economy and ensuring its health and growth. It can't grow, and you pointed out the lilies in the pond. Every scientist I've talked to agrees with me. We're past the 29th minute. And all this talk about grow, 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 we've got to go into not just a static economy. We've got to degrow our economy. We, 20% of the world in the rich countries, are using over 80% of the planet's resources. And we love to say it's overpopulation. It's those brown, black, and yellow people. They're breeding like flies. But wait a minute now. It's not just a function of numbers. It's how much do you consume per person. We are consuming over 80% of the planet's resources and leaving a pittance for the developing world. And we act as if they're the problem. We're the major predator. And the only opportunity, if we're not going to go and slaughter people, the only opportunity we have is to cut back on our consumption and our economic growth. So this is the challenge, is the growth economy, and what do we do about that? And what do we do about nature that doesn't play a role in the economic system? Thank you very much.